Africa Day commemorated in Asmara. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in collaboration with the African Group, commemorated the 63rd anniversary of Africa Day on June 13th at Asmara Palace Hotel under the theme Africa, One Heart, One Land, One Destiny. The event was attended by Mint and PFDJ officials, ambassadors accredited to Eritrea, members of the diplomatic community, and other invited guests. In his keynote address, Mr. Osman Saleh, Minister of Foreign Affairs, said that this year's theme of the African Union is assuring sustainable water availability and safe sanitation systems to achieve the goals of Agenda 2063. He noted that the theme is not only timely, but also fundamental. Minister Osman went on to say that Africa Day is being celebrated in Eritrea under the theme Africa, One Heart, One Land, One Destiny, reflecting shared identity, collective memory, and values of solidarity, hospitality, and mutual support, and that the vision of an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in the international arena, remains viable today. Noting that the African people continue to suffer from poverty amid the enormous wealth of the continent, and that conflicts continue to ravage the continent, destroying lives, property, and opportunities, Minister Osman said it is imperative that the continent undertake a thorough evaluation of its current reality and craft strategies to extricate itself from poverty and conflicts, as well as to augment the integration and complementarity required for collective action. Reiterating that the global order is changing, Minister Osman underlined that competition for resources and strategic partnerships is increasing, while global challenges such as climate stress, public health threats, and inequality require coordinated solutions. In the midst of this transformation, Minister Osman stressed the importance of Africa as a rich continent endowed with precious natural resources, managing those resources with integrity, discipline, and a shared long-term vision so that they can drive inclusive growth and sustainable development. Mr. Percy Mbuzili Kumsha, Ambassador of the Republic of South Africa to Eritrea, for his part, underlined, Africa Day is more than a commemoration. It is a reaffirmation of our collective journey, that we are bound by a common destiny. This is a golden opportunity for us to conduct continental introspection. That means we cannot act alone in this mission. We need smart partnerships. The event was preceded by various joint activities earlier in the week, including a panel discussion on African unity in the changing global order and a football match between the staff of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and a selected team from the African embassies in Eritrea. FIFA gesture to referee Omar Artan only partially softens blow of World Cup denial. The Somali official has already been picked up by UEFA to referee the 2026 Super Cup. Referee Omar Artan stays in the headlines after it was reported that FIFA intends to pay the Somali denied entry to the United States and therefore his chance to officiate at the World Cup his full fee. Artan probably would have preferred to just get on with things. The 34-year-old was slated to become the first Somali to referee at the World Cup, having been selected for the tournament by FIFA in an extensive process that began around 3 years ago. But after arriving in Miami on a flight from Istanbul in the days before the World Cup began, Artan, 2025's best referee in Africa, was turned away by Custom and Border Protection following further inspection. With trouble securing a visa because Somalia is named on the Trump administration's travel ban list, Artan managed to obtain a diplomatic passport instead. That ought to have been enough to get into the country, but it later emerged that CBP alleged the referee had links with a terror organization, which he denied any such knowledge of during the inspection. Artan received a hero's welcome on his arrival back in Somali capital Mogadishu and has since been appointed by UEFA to referee the 2026 Super Cup between Paris Saint-Germain and Aston Villa in August. UEFA wants to show its respect to Omar and his outstanding officiating skills. BBC Sport first reported that FIFA has committed to paying his salary, or the salary he would have earned from officiating at the tournament, in full. ESPN later noted that Artan will be paid for his match assignments, suggesting the games he was expected to officiate. How much do World Cup referees get paid? The fee is only paid after the tournament is over, and some referees could earn more than others because it depends on how many matches they are involved with. At the 2022 World Cup, the base rate came in at a reported $70,000. Officials could then earn up to $5,000 more for each match they were involved with the exact amount depending on their role in the match round. This year, rumor has it the fee could start at $100,000, supposedly around double what it had been for the 2014 World Cup in Brazil. Retired Premier League referee Mark Clattenburg recently explained on an episode of the Whistleblowers podcast that daily allowances are also paid out to cover basic expenses. He said that UEFA European Championship tournaments differ in that compensation is built around individual matches, rather than payment of a flat fee topped up by game bonuses. TPLF faction threatening to push northern Ethiopia back into conflict. Former Tigray Interim Administration official warns. A faction of the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, which illegally ousted the regional interim administration, is pursuing a course that could plunge northern Ethiopia back into a devastating cycle of conflict. Professor Kandia Gebrhiwot, former head of the Cabinet Secretariat of the First Tigray Interim Regional Administration, has warned. Professor Kandia urged governments, regional organizations, and development partners to take a firmer stance against those undermining the peace process in Tigray. He stressed, however, that the group attempting to create instability should not be equated with the TPLF as a whole. To make the record straight, he said, TPLF has been divided into different groups, and there is one criminal group that recently staged a coup against the interim regional administration. This criminal group continues to engage in activities that pose serious concerns and could lead to confrontation. He described the situation as deeply alarming, warning that this group cannot live without such a conflict. Professor Kandia commended the Ethiopian government's maximum patience in safeguarding the peace process and pointed to growing public opposition within Tigray to any return to war. According to him, the faction has consistently resisted the implementation of the Pretoria Agreement and sought to obstruct successive interim administrations established to facilitate post-war recovery, governance reform, and political normalization in the Tigray region. He said the group worked against both the administration led by Ethio-Eritrea, the first interim chief administrator, and the subsequent administration headed by Lieutenant General Tadesse Wareed, despite initially supporting the latter's appointment. The pattern has remained the same, he said. Whenever there is an opportunity to advance peace, recovery, and institutional stability, they seek to create obstacles and maintain conditions of confrontation. Professor Kandia stressed that unresolved political, governance, and border-related issues should be resolved through dialogue, constitutional processes, and democratic institutions rather than by military means. Expressing concern over the faction's recent activities, he also raised alarm over reports of forced military recruitment in parts of the Tigray region, alleging that young people are being rounded up and sent to training camps against their will. At the same time, he said efforts to mobilize large numbers of young people voluntarily have largely failed, reflecting widespread public opposition to renewed conflict. Many young people are rejecting the prospect of war, he said. There's a growing sentiment throughout Tigray that another round of fighting will be catastrophic for the region. Recalling the devastating consequences of the 2-year conflict in northern Ethiopia, Professor Kandia emphasized that Tigray remains economically and socially fragile and is in no position to endure another military confrontation. Tigray has already paid an enormous price, he said. The region should now be focused on rehabilitation, reconstruction, and healing rather than being dragged back into war. The professor also expressed concern over what he described as external efforts to destabilize the region, citing attempts to forge alliances involving anti-peace actors both inside and outside Ethiopia. Referring to the so-called Simdo Alliance, he said certain actors were promoting arrangements aimed at escalating tensions and undermining Ethiopia's stability. Professor Kandia stressed that all stakeholders committed to regional peace should unequivocally reject any attempts to reignite conflict, as reported by local news agency ENA. There must be sustainable peace in the region, he said. We should strongly condemn such unholy alliances. Having witnessed the war firsthand, I know the immense suffering that conflict brought to Tigray. He further warned that external involvement in local disputes could transform domestic tensions into a broader regional crisis with far-reaching consequences for the Horn of Africa. Addressing the role of the international community, Professor Kandia called on governments, regional organizations, and development partners to take a stronger stance against individuals working to undermine the peace process. The international community should call a spade, he said. Those who are working to reignite conflict should be identified and held individually accountable. He emphasized that preserving the gains of the Pretoria Agreement requires sustained international vigilance and continued support for peaceful political engagement. Describing the Pretoria Agreement as a historic opportunity to move beyond conflict, Professor Kandia said it offers a path toward recovery, development, and reconciliation. Ethiopia's future depends on peace, he concluded. This should be a time for reconstruction, development, and national healing, not another round of conflict.